Can you make a trade for an NBA championship? Not in the literal terms of shipping off a player and getting the Larry O'Brien trophy in return, but in the sense of making correct and subtle trades over time to build a solid contender, or simply shipping out all of your depth in return for a superstar in hopes of a championship. The 2021 Brooklyn Nets had the third best preseason odds of capturing the title, with a Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant duo alongside a talented supporting cast. However, Durant and the front office felt the need to not just double down, but triple down. They traded away most of their depth to bring in James Harden in the hopes of guaranteeing that season's championship. It blew up right in their face. On the other side, the Denver Nuggets were firm believers that they had a solid young duo in Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic that could one day compete for a championship with the right pieces around them. Over the years, the organization made moves for players that would mesh perfectly alongside their franchise cornerstones. The patience and strategic moves resulted in the first championship in franchise history. So can trades, in a sense, win a championship? Well, we're about to find out. In 1978, the Boston Celtics had the 6th overall pick in the NBA draft, which they used to select a promising college star who elected to play his final season at Indiana State before making the jump to the NBA. After his first season and a Rookie of the Year award, Boston felt the need to build around this young superstar if they wanted to compete for a championship. That offseason, they shipped off 2 first-round picks to the Golden State Warriors. In return, they got big man Robert Parrish and a draft pick that became Kevin McHale. Yeah, in one of the most lopsided trades you will ever hear, the Boston Celtics robbed 2/3 of one of the greatest front courts ever to pair up with their young superstar, Larry Bird. Boston went on to win a championship the very next season after the trade, and 2 more in the 80s as one of the greatest Celtics teams ever assembled. It was all thanks to a trade. But the big 3 would grow old and eventually make their way into head coaching or front office positions as Boston struggled for decades trying to build another championship contender. That was until June 28th of 2007. The Boston Celtics make a blockbuster trade that will launch them into immediate playoff contention. A 6-time All-Star with a dead-eye jump shot fitting perfectly alongside a prime Paul Pierce. His name? Ray Allen. A move that would shake up the NBA world. Until the earthquake happened. Kevin Garnett shipped to the Celtics a mere 32 days after the Ray Allen trade to create the NBA's next super team. Boston was gifted an MVP for peanuts from the Minnesota Timberwolves, whose general manager at the time was Kevin McHale. Once a Celtic, always a Celtic. In these cases, Boston technically traded for championships. But in today's NBA, teams are much more diligent with their first-round picks, and a trade for a superstar nowadays would cost you at the very least an all-star caliber player in return. It begs the question, if you have championship aspirations, should you go out and make a move for a star or a role player? Or is it best to stand pat and trust that the team will eventually grow into a contender in the near future? Well, to answer that question, we'd have to learn from the teams that did win and their willingness to make trades during their championship season. Last year's Denver Nuggets made a total of 3 trades en route to their first title, one of which brought in a key contributor in Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. In 2022, the Warriors made just 1 trade during their run, and it came before the season even started. By looking at our last 16 NBA champions, you begin to see a trend. Teams are content with what they have, and oftentimes don't feel the need to retool their current roster. Only 4 of the last 16 champions made 3 or more trades during the season that they won it all. It's a fascinating observation, but overall it's poor information. Some of these trades account for 2nd-round picks being shipped off for cash considerations. It doesn't take into account the years and years of decisions that were made in the process of creating these championship teams. So let's reset. During their run, the Denver Nuggets' playoff roster was 40% players that they drafted, 20% players that they've signed, and 40% of players acquired through trades. As I mentioned earlier, they had their core of players and just made minor tweaks to build around it. And it worked. 53% of the Warriors' championship roster were players that they drafted, and only 14% of their players were obtained through trades, a testament to their sound front office. In fact, of the last 16 NBA champions, only one team had a roster where over 50% of their players were acquired through trades, and it wasn't the '08 Celtics, it was the 2011 Dallas Mavericks. Despite Dirk only playing for one franchise, his draft rights were acquired in a trade on draft night, and even though Dallas did draft Jason Kidd, he left and then was reacquired 3 years prior to their championship run. History tells us that trades don't win championships, that competent front offices do, with draft picks and signings. Although the 2008 Celtics, 2019 Raptors, and 2020 Lakers have a small percentage of their players acquired through trades, Ray Allen, Kevin Garnett, Kawhi Leonard, and Anthony Davis were major pieces when it came to the team's ability to immediately contend for a championship. But it was only made possible in unique and perfect circumstances. DeMar DeRozan had the same trade value that Kawhi Leonard had at the time, which allowed Toronto to make the trade without breaking the foundation of their team. The Lakers had a young core that wasn't ready to compete for a championship with LeBron, so they shipped out pieces that they didn't need in the short term and got a generational talent in return. And for Boston, I mean, they just scammed Seattle and Minnesota to build their super team. It was highway robbery. Nowadays, a front office will ship out their core and identity without thinking twice about it, in return for a star that won't always increase their chances of winning. Is it done for the betterment of the team, or is it a product of today's owners being fans more than they are businessmen? At least that's what Gilbert Arenas believes.
They cared more about their salary cap and money then, right? Because it wasn't. Today, these owners are more fans than businessmen. Back then, it was businessmen only. So
it's a great observation, because we didn't see greatness move from team to team during their prime 20 to 30 years ago. The team around them got better. They didn't have to leave. I guess it's a sign of the times. Crazy billionaire basketball superfans who make moves like they own a fantasy team. Are the home run trades that we see today done to create a balanced championship contender? Or are they done for flair and excitement? Because they don't always lead to championships. In fact, here are 19 stars that have been traded in hopes of winning a championship since 2008. Want to take a guess at how many of these players won a ring with the team that traded for them? 4. Only 4 players made it beneficial for the team that gambled on them. It is very rare to trade for a superstar and still have enough continuity to where your team doesn't need to solely rely on those stars. Making a blockbuster trade for one of these guys will not guarantee a championship, because if it did, every organization would make that move without blinking. But what about playoff success? Did trading for these stars lead to increased success in the postseason? Or was it just a complete failure? Well, here are those same stars and their win shares relative to the amount of games played during the playoffs in their first year with that team. Kawhi Leonard and Anthony Davis find themselves all the way up here. Not only did they win a championship in their first season after the trade, but they impacted winning to the highest degree, making their acquisition well worth the price. But that wasn't the case for everybody else. Down here, you'll find players who played extremely poorly or barely played for that matter due to injuries, like Dwight Howard in LA and Kyrie Irving in Boston, a regretful decision for the team that traded for them. And in the middle, you'll see players like Chris Paul in Houston and Jimmy Butler in Philadelphia, who despite helping the team reach some sort of playoff success, they never reached the pinnacle of the playoffs. Now, trading for a star isn't just a one-year ordeal. They may stay and impact winning for years to come. So here they are in their second and third playoff runs with that team. Pau Gasol is just on his own planet, as his impact on the Lakers winning back-to-back championships speaks for itself. It stands as one of the most valuable trades of the last 15 years. Other guys like Chris Paul during his Clippers tenure and Kevin Love with the Cavaliers proved over time that they were worth trading for. And here are the rest of the playoff runs that those players had with their teams before eventually moving on. Because in this era of the NBA, players are here for a good time, not a long time. Oftentimes, when a team is selling their star, they don't improve from where they were, and teams that acquire stars haven't reached further playoff success. And for those who did, it was short-lived. There's obvious upside to adding one of the most talented players in the NBA to your roster, but it also comes with risk. Are you giving up too much? Does the player fit your team or your culture? Does he play well with other stars? It requires strategic player acquisitions, draft picks, and cap management from the front office. And even if all of these boxes are checked, you need luck and timing to even have a chance at the title. There's a sense of pride and fulfillment to build a core and a culture that grows into a championship team. Every dynasty that we've seen across the course of NBA history is built in-house around a player or players that were drafted to that franchise. And soon enough, history is going to repeat itself with a team built around a core of players that are still on the team that drafted them. So I'll ask again, can you trade for an NBA championship? If done properly, yes, you can. But the odds are definitely not in your favor.